breaking down the Niners, but it is time. We have gone too far into this show to not get into some Sacramento Kings, as they will start against Karl Anthony Towns. After all that, Anthony Edwards, the Ant-Man, everyone's favorite Avenger, all right, coming off of that Olympic run where he had his moments for sure, and Rudy Gobert, the silver medalist, as Kendrick Perkins continues to talk about how his greatest regret in media is voting Kendrick Perkins for Defensive Player of the Year. They will open up the season coming off a back-to-back. That's not our problem. And they will be in Sacramento at Doco under the bright lights to kick off the 2024-2025 NBA season. But with that being said, Chris, I was thinking about this. And for those listening, obviously, Chris and I, we haven't been together for over a week. So, you know, it hasn't been too long, but we're kind of shooting from the hip here. And I was having some thoughts, Chris, about the trade deadline. And, you know, we didn't really talk about this prior to the show. Okay. And we're going to do it live right here. And you can tell me if I'm crazy or not. All right. Because I feel like we haven't always seen eye to eye on how urgent the Kings should be acting, right? And last week, and even taking it to the Warriors with Steph Curry balling out, how bad do the Warriors look any worse now saying, hey, we're not moving Podziemski or Kuminga with Steph Curry doing this? Does that add any urgency for them? But this is what I'm thinking, Chris. When you are a team like I would even put the Lakers in this category now, because everybody's running out of time and nobody wants to pay these high prices. Okay. Two first for Jeremy Grant. You have Lakers sources saying that's ridiculous. They're not doing it. Whatever. 2 first-rounders for Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith. You name them, anyone who is worth anything. And maybe part of that is with the CBA and that second apron. If anybody's on a good deal, hey, well, if we're giving you somebody on a good deal and control, you definitely coming off those picks. So this is what I'm thinking. All these teams that maybe think that they are in the mix, but they're not sure. Essentially, their thought process is they want to see if they get off to a hot start, right?
Or a bad start. You're either better than you thought you were going to be, you either are worse than you thought you were going to be, or you are exactly where you thought you would be.
My question to you is, where do you think the Kings, that middle one, where do you think the Kings think they will be? What would be playing better than expected? Obviously, we know it would be worse. But where do you think the Kings think that they are? And with that being said, if they do think, all right, we think we're going to be here, if a bunch of teams, if we know there's about 3 teams that are just better in the West and then it's a mix, if all those teams are in the same clump again, the bidding war never ends, right?
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. I would guess that the Kings probably assume that, just like you said, they're going to be in that middle pack. I don't think that they feel like, maybe they do, but I think it would be exceeding expectations if they are a top 3 seed, if they can somehow sneak into that OKC, Denver, even though I think Denver's going to slip, Minnesota, Dallas, they're probably in that top tier. And then I would think that the Kings probably realistically expect to be either at the top of the next tier or like in the middle of the next tier, in that 4 to 7 range. I think is probably where the Kings would be okay with. Obviously, if you're more towards the 7, you start to feel like, okay, maybe we did underachieve, but like you said, maybe it could just be that it was so tight. We're talking 7 through 4 seed is the difference of a game and a half or something like that. So, you know, that, like you said, it can be a little bit confusing when it's all bunched together. But I would think if you're, you know, looking at the play-in situation again, if you're the 8, 9, 10 seed, frankly, I think that's where you could see them start to feel like they are a little bit off schedule, or like they maybe would want to make a move at the deadline to try and improve. But I would just say in terms of the deadline specifically, or the sense of urgency from the Kings at the deadline, if that is the case, I just think they aren't in a state of emergency the same way Golden State is or LA, because their timelines aren't the same. The Lakers and Warriors have to maximize their superstars' timeline. The Kings, I mean, you know, Fox and Sabonis are just entering their prime. There shouldn't be a level of urgency or a rush to expedite the process because you have the luxury of having more of a well, I guess I won't use the term runway so we don't mix our term, but you have more of a window. You have more of a window to win, where the Lakers and Warriors, they have a year, maybe two, to try and get this thing done. And so they have to be aggressive in getting guys. Kings can afford to wait until the offseason if they really want to. Of course, it might lead to some frustration, but it's not the end of the world if they go into next season not accomplishing their goals this season.
Yeah, which now that you say it that way, it almost feels like you could make arguments both ways to not make a move. You have just convinced me that the Kings probably won't do anything, because if they are, let's say they're ahead of, let's say they're playing really well, right? Or let's say they're a 4 seed compared to where they were last season. Okay, well, let's just ride with what we got. I mean, Mavericks got in as a 5 seed, right? If they're behind schedule, no, we're not going to, let's say they're stuck in an 8 seed or a 9 seed, right? And the trade deadline's coming. Well, because our window is different than the Lakers or the Warriors, we're not going to get desperate like them and give up, I'm being ridiculous here, Keegan Murray for Cam or something crazy like that just to try to catch up and get in the mix. It is what it is. We'll reevaluate at the end of the season. But I'm also just kind of speaking for fans that this could be, I guess it wouldn't be frustrating if obviously they're a 4 seed. I don't think there are going to be a lot of people saying, get over the top, do it now. There will be some, but I don't think a ton. But I do think if the Kings aren't where they should be, it'll be interesting trying to explain to fans why they probably won't get desperate to get better, whereas a lot of fans are going to feel like, why wouldn't you try to get better?
Well, I don't think that just because they're good, too, means that they're just going to opt out of the trade deadline in general. It just speaks to the targets that they might go after. I mean, obviously, if you're exceeding expectations, you might not feel like, okay, well, maybe we were shooting too high with a Cam Johnson and a Kyle Kuzma, and it's a good thing we weren't going to give up 2 first-round picks, because it turns out actually all we needed to do is trade 2 seconds for Dorian Finney-Smith, or trade whatever, 1 first-round pick for player X, who isn't nearly as good as Kyle Kuzma and these other guys, but he fits a role that we specifically need. So I don't think that their success necessarily opts them in or out of the deadline, but it might just determine who exactly they want to go after the deadline. And definitely the sense of urgency. But again, I would just say it more than likely the Kings aren't going to go make a big wholesale change at the deadline, because they already did make a really big change this offseason. I would have already always expected them to go and make marginal moves or moves that, for their 7th or maybe a fringe starter. But I wouldn't think that if they were to take this thing into the season, I just wouldn't expect them to be a Kyle Kuzma, a Cam Johnson trade target, especially if things get actually to the deadline. Maybe if things are early in the season, but I just wouldn't expect it.
One of the top prospects in the NBA is due for a hefty extension. How does this affect